Welcome to Skara Spotlight, a video podcast where we dig deep into the journeys of content creators. I'm your host, Roshni.
And I'm Chandana, your co host for the day. Today, we have with us an incredible guest who is a myriad of things. For starters, he's an illustrator, a graphic designer, a content creator, a blogger, a writer, a TEDx speaker. Plus, he has made history by being crowned Mr. Gay World India 2016, becoming the youngest title holder in the competition's history. And you were just 20, right?
Yes, I was.
So we welcome you, Anwesh, to our podcast, Skara Spotlight.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Roshni and Chandana. Really grateful to be here. Thank you for having me.
So,
Yeah,
without any further ado, so let's just dive in and
yeah.
start with the questions.
Are you pumped up?
Yeah,
Always, I stay ready.
Yeah,
that's great.
that's great. That's great. That's the energy we are looking
Yeah,
for.
exactly.
All right, let's dive in, shall we?
Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Great.
So, all right, Anvesh, where did your inspiration stem from to start creating content, especially in fashion illustration and the utopian themes that surround your world of FM and Air, the blog that you have, right, that you've started? So, can you speak about that?
Sure, absolutely. So this was actually way back in 2012, and around that time I was kind of struggling a bit with my sexuality, and I was kind of getting to know more about queerness. I was getting to know more about the world of like LGBTIQA plus, which was an absolutely foreign concept to me. So and I think around that time I kind of started realizing I was obviously growing up, and like I was like these were towards the end of my teenage years, so like I was around 16, 17, and I started realizing that maybe the way I kind of feel towards men is not a phase, and the way I feel is basically what is called homosexuality. And I remember like when having this conversation with myself and like spiraling down and like, oh my god, like this can't be, like this can't be true, I can't be this. So it was actually a very difficult time in some ways for me, but I just felt that I needed a channel. And at that point, I think one of my sister used to have a blog.
Oh,
And
great.
I had come across like a couple of more people who used to have blogs, because that was an era when blogs used to be a big thing.
Right.
People used to have, remember the dot blogspot era, and the
Right.
dot
True.
WordPress era. So
Yes.
everybody had these amazing blogs, and that's how people connected. Like very, this is pre-Instagram. Like of course Instagram had come around 2010, but it didn't exactly permeate the largest masses and the larger society the way it has today. So at that point blogs were still big, and I used to follow a lot of fashion bloggers. I used to follow a lot of poets and writers. So I just felt that I had so much to say, and a blog would be kind of like a nice way of journaling my thoughts. And it was also like every time I was angry, every time I was anxious, I had this as a channel to kind of blurt it out, spit it out, and forget about it, and also in that process like achieve a form of like catharsis of sorts. So like I didn't have words for these this at that point in time, but like now looking back, of course I can see that this was very much a way of like achieving catharsis. But anyway, so I just started off with writing these little blogs, and then I realized that there were like people who were reading it. So it was just not me and my sister who were reading my blog, but I would post it on Facebook, and like there would be like 100 people, who would read it and who would respond to it, and there were comments, and then I started making friends from all around the world who still are my friends from that era as well. So it just became a thing, and eventually, of course, because I've always been an artist. So I started like painting stuff on like my canvas, and I would take like a picture of it, and then I would post it on Instagram. But then on Instagram everything is very very nicely done and nicely edited, and like I like that aspect of like the finesse basically of sharing your work. So I had like a little digicam, that small one that you would have. So I would take a picture on that, because that those days even the phones that I had, they were not that great. I would take my pictures on my digicam, and then I would like transfer it on my laptop, and then send it to me, so myself on my phone, and then I would post it. So then that's basically how it all started, and I started making like a lot of extremely like colorful, like crazy, colorful stuff. And it was hugely inspired by Manish Arora. Like Manish Arora was one of my biggest, like, someone who I really looked up to. And I think at that point he was also the head of design at, he was probably the creative director of Paco Rabanne, which was a big deal for like an Indian designer to go to Paris and become such a big deal. And I think I remember there was this collection that he had made where I think Philip Tracy had made like these satellite themed headdresses, and Gaga wore one of his collections, and Gaga used to wear like Manish Arora. So for me, it was like such a big deal that there was this incredible designer who I really connected with in some ways, and his work was being worn by these big artists, and Gaga was like mother to me, like I was a little monster. So anyway, I think I saw all of that and I felt very connected to it, and I was like, okay, great, I'm going to create work inspired by all of this. And then eventually I was obviously more, I wanted to create work for my Instagram, so I started basically like, it was there was no vision, like larger vision. It was just I wanted to create stuff for my Instagram. Simple. It's as simple as that. So I started doing all that, and then eventually I reached a point where I wanted to create like better work, and that's how I got myself. I remember like a Wacom tablet, which was just like these really cheap little tablets that used to come at that point, and I would connect it to my laptop, and I would create stuff on Photoshop. So yeah, I think that's how it started. I got like a little internship. I learned a lot from that internship. Started putting my work together, and it just became a thing. Like it was there was no nothing. It was just a lot of like pure love for the art and a lot of like passion, a lot of the urge to do something bigger and better. And it just started being like people started connecting to it, and I was very grateful for it, and I started making more and more and more of that art, and it's thank God to that. I mean, it's become what it has become because of all that, those days.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
I
that's
think
great.
your love for art actually shows, it
Shows.
reflects on your work. So,
Yeah.
really, I agree to everything that you said. So, a little bit about your blog. How has it, we know the journey now, we know your inspiration. So, how has it evolved since its inception? Where is the state? Where will it go?
I think one of my biggest inspirations today in my art is definitely my growing up years. Like they have a huge influence on anything that I create, and I also feel like I come from a culture which hasn't had as much presence in pop culture. Like I'm in Odia. I
Yes.
grew up in like my childhood days are from growing up in this small place called Konya in Odisha. I would go. I remember like my mother used to make these Patachitra paintings, so I would go with her, and in fact one of these paintings it's actually right over here piche.
Right.
I made eventually from by learning from the same teacher that my mother had learned from. See, like around 3 or 4, my mother used to take me with her for those drawing classes. So I would sit there and I would spend basically like the entire morning half just sitting there at the veranda or like sitting with my mother, and my mother would bring that painting back home and she would be painting, so I would just be sitting there and just watching a lot. And then my sister was she's an Odissi dancer, so she used to learn Odissi at that point from a teacher. So all the girls would come to our home, and then the teacher would come to our home, and everybody was basically kind of like learning from him. So I would just sit there and watch them perform. I would go to my sister's performances. So all of this basically had like a huge like impact on me. And today when I do anything, I look back at that mostly. And of course today my work is an amalgamation of like my experience growing up and my experience as a queer person growing up in India, and all the references that I grew up with from Odisha overall. And I think we are such a culturally rich state, that there is so much to look at and so much to be inspired from, that there is never like a dearth of inspiration in any way. And of course today you through Instagram and through Pinterest and through like all the pop culture like references that there are, we consume so much through especially drag references as well. I think I love following drag queens. I love following these like fashion enthusiasts, and today I think the world of fashion is also an amalgamation of not just designers who just make clothes, but there are, like, like I mentioned about Philip Tracy, who makes headdresses, or there are, like, I think Alexis Stone, for example, someone who makes a lot of experiments, a lot with prosthetics, and a lot of, like, crazy avant-garde makeup, and they experiment with 3D artistry as well. 3D printing has become such a big part of our life today. So I, of course, like, follow a lot of these people, and I'm hugely inspired by all of them. And it's basically, my work is like, an amalgamation of all of these references that I grew up with, references that I get to come across today, and my experience as a queer person. And I think that's why it is so unique, because my references are so niche, and I always like creating original work. Like, there's so much happening in my head that I don't like creating something that already exists. I want to create something that is like an exaggerated version of what's going on in my head. And I think when there's so much going in your head, you really cannot go out of, like, any references. So today, a lot of my work that I post on Instagram is somewhere in between cyber art, where I basically have, my own, take my own pictures or get my pictures clicked by photographers, and then I basically, like, superimpose my pictures with these avant-garde outfits and hair and makeup, like, references, and create, like, almost like a digital drag form of sorts. But in a lot of ways, I'm also inspired by, like, hyper masculine stuff, like, the most exaggerated version of masculinity is what, like, is one of my biggest reference points. So I look at that and I put it all together, and I create, like, cyber art pieces. And then, of course, there is also, like, right now I'm doing dancing men series, which is basically like exploring Indian men dancing any classical Indian form of dance. So it could be any dance form. It could be an amalgamation of a lot of classical dance forms as well. But it's just a figment of my imagination, basically. And when I see that something is clicking with the larger audience, then I continue to do that, and it's great practice for me. Um, and it's great when people kind of associate themselves to the work. And I don't think I ever thought so much or so deeply about commercializing my art, but I'm so grateful that it has reached that point where it has become commercial. And I sell my prints. I, of course, collaborate with a lot of big tech firms. um, I work full time with Aristocrat Gaming, which is a gaming company, and I sometimes ideate, like, games for them as well, and it's really fun. Like, right now, I'm really at a place where I have basically diversified my art form entirely, and there is nothing that kind of limits me. And I'm obviously extremely inspired by technology, so tech is a big part of what I do. So I'm always experimenting, trying to figure out multiple ways of creating work. I, of course, experiment a lot with, like, 3D work as well. So I use Blender a lot, which is a 3D free software um, that anybody can basically use to create anything. So when I started using it, I was like, this is fantastic. I love it. So I started creating work from there as well. So yeah, it's basically an amalgamation of so many things now, right now.
So we've explored your work, your art
Yeah.
on your Instagram, on your
Mhm.
Behance, on Ephemerer as well. So yeah, Roshni and I, we are
Yeah.
pretty amateurs, or we don't know much about this, design world. We are always like going gaga about your work. It's
Yeah.
Oh,
super
thank
cool.
you.
It's
It's
super
super
camp.
vibrant and
It's
it's really good.
yeah,
It's
it's
really
very
good. I
it's
mean, we were really impressed. We
we were
saw and it
like
was like, wow, it's so good.
this was the expression that we
Yeah,
had on our
exactly.
faces.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was
So
really good.
yeah, your art kind of follows a unique style of its own,
Yes,
right? So
exactly.
could you tell us, did you develop it over time? Like you said, it's original, all of it, right?
Yeah.
So like, how did this happen? What's this form of art called? uh, should you have a G tag or something, GI tag for yourself?
Oh my God, not GI tag. Not yet. Maybe copyright my work. I don't know. Uh, I think so. Initially, like, I remember when I started off on Instagram, like, I'm talking about 2014 was the first when I joined Instagram, and I used to just share pictures, and then I started creating my own work. And I would, back in the day, like, you could use hashtags to also, like, really, like, people basically found other people's art through hashtags. Hashtags were a big thing at that point. I think now it's kind of toned down a bit. But back in the day, it was really a big deal. So I would basically use those hashtags and find other artists who's doing what is it that is working. And then I found like a bunch of artists who I basically followed with all my heart. So I think Shamek Bluey, I think he's a Jordan-based artist. He's a fashion illustrator. He's an architect who became a fashion illustrator, and I would love following his work. I really enjoyed whatever he created. I was like, wow, this is just amazing, incredible, crazy, like um, just another level of art that I've never come across. And he had really mastered the form of like digital illustrations, but also like fashion illustrations. There was also Megan Morrison, who is now a good friend of mine. She's a New York-based artist, and she makes fashion illustrations as well. And she had this blog called, Travel, Write, and Draw. So she would just travel, and she would, collaborate with brands to create fashion illustrations. So I would follow them, and I would see like what did they create. Like I would go to their websites, I would see how they've created and curated their work. And I would also Shamek Bluey used to also put recordings of his work. So like the entire process of him creating his artwork, he would record it and he would post it. So I would go and observe just how is he creating all of them. So yeah, I think that's how I basically started with copying other artists, and that's how a lot of artists start off. You can't have an original style right away, and I think that's something that a lot of people do, and I think that's where you kind of get you kind of stifle yourself as an artist, because you have to kind of, in some ways, I would recommend like any artist who's kind of starting out to kind of go in some ways the traditional way of like learning and practicing, like human forms, for example. If you are into like anatomy, then just practice a lot of anatomy. So I have this book called Drawing Faces by Andrew Loomis, and the great artist from like the 50s and the 60s, and he's written a book about how he uses simple forms to like chalk out the entire like posture and the movement, the rhythm in the body when you're drawing something. Perspective drawing is another thing that I was really inspired by. So I just practiced a lot. Like I created a lot of work, and of course looked at other people's artwork and try to replicate that work, and that's how I basically learned how to draw. And then eventually, I think you reach a point as an artist when you're living so much as an artist as well. When you travel a lot, when you meet a lot of people, when you consume, of course, a lot of like I said, pop culture references as well, you become you start refining your artwork, and then you reach a point where you don't look at references anymore, and then you're just creating work out of your lived experiences. So I think you have to live a lot, like you have to live a lot to create incredible art. And I've been through a lot of like turmoil in my personal life, and of course that has influenced what I create. I remember Amrit Pal Singh, who's an incredible artist, known for his toy faces. He makes a lot of these beautiful 3D toy faces, and he spoke about how you don't have to go through like depression to become a great artist. You can be a happy artist as well, which I do agree with. But I do agree that sometimes when you go through a lot of like difficult times, it kind of refines you, and when you come out of those difficult times, you become just like a stronger person, and you become a better person. And your process of creating like anything new, of course, changes as well, and it just has a lot more perspective. And that's what people connect with, right? Because everybody is going through a lot, and when they see your work, they should feel a sense of connection, but they should also feel happy. And I think for me, it's always like I want to make people happy. I'm not here at all for like have like sad endings or unhappy endings, or people go through stuff. People go through difficult times. Um, yeah, I don't want to create basically anything that's sad. That's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think experiences do shape up your
The way
work,
you
you
work, and
perceive
it
them. Yeah.
reflects. Now that you have mentioned about your art and
Mhm.
stuff, uh, you also mentioned about hypermasculinity,
Mhm.
right? So how do you see your art as a tool for like social change and activism, especially in a country like India?
Yeah. So I think obviously the way I look at masculinity is obviously very different from the way other people look at it. And I think that is a revelation, or like a realization that has come to me over time, because I grew up, like, any idea of like a distinction between masculinity and femininity was an idea that I would like um, vehemently reject growing up. Like, anybody would say to me कि अच्छा ये लड़कों के लिए है and this is for girls, I would be like, that doesn't make sense to me. By default, by design, it doesn't make sense to me. So I would always reject it, and I think over time, obviously, that's why my idea of masculinity was a very um, fluid identity. But I think over time, like, I was obviously like very in a way kind of almost fascinated um, with the idea of hyper masculinity. And when I watch, or when I hear conversations around films where there is this idea of like the alpha male being discussed, I think that entire conversation to me is it's obviously very different to me, it's very unique to me, and it's something that I listen to. Of course, I may not entirely connect to that idea, but I want to know what that idea is. Like, what is it that people are so attracted to? And of course, like, I'm a man who's attracted to men, so um, I'm always fascinated by like different forms of masculinity. I'm very fascinated by fluid forms of masculinity. Um, I'm very, you know, inspired in terms of, like, when I look at fashion, I love ideas which kind of don't conform to um, any extreme idea of gender identities. Um, but in my art, I love drawing, like, hyper masculine stuff, and I think clearly the way I look at the extreme idea of masculinity is not the way the larger masses look at it. For me, what I create is like super hyper masculine. It's like a very exaggerated version of masculinity, almost like, bordering like drag in some ways. But that idea of masculinity is obviously very foreign to most of the people, and they find it obviously very fascinating. I think the way I kind of, like, especially when I, for example, create cyber art pieces, I'm, for example, like, I created this piece which was highly inspired by Schiaparelli, and I gave myself these, really, like, over the top, like, boots, and, like, this over the top hair, and it's on my like, it's on pinned on my Instagram as well right now. So to me, that is like an extreme idea of hyper masculinity, but for someone else that might be something else entirely, different. And I love when my work is like food for thought for people. So um, I kind of want to, in some ways, also break out of the idea of, okay, only this can be masculine. I think in some ways, because we are also visual, I like when people look at my work and they're shocked that I am calling this the hyper idea, or the extreme idea of masculinity. And that's all that I want, people to kind of be exposed to other ideas of masculinity. And I think that's when the new normal, or the new idea of masculinity, becomes normalized, right? And I don't want to be in some parallel niche world creating my work. I want to be very much a part of the mainstream. So I want my art to be there, like, on the streets, very much on the streets, so everybody gets to have access to it. And I want to have my work very much in, like, museums as well, where everybody could go and, look at that work. Or if there is a niche audience that comes and appreciates it, why not? Recently, my artwork was picked in Belgium by the Ad Crush Gallery, and it was basically like it was on the streets of Belgium throughout, and they put it all up on the billboards, and I was so happy that, and the piece was called "The Effeminate Man," which is basically like my experience as growing up as a man, and the turmoil, and the strength and the vulnerability that you experience as a man. So um, I was just very happy that people could kind of look at my vision and my idea of masculinity, and whether or not they relate to it, it's up to them. If they find it fascinating, I'm.
Yeah.
That's really great. So now that you have mentioned about masculinity and you have mentioned about gender, we just were curious to know about this one thing that we know, right? That navigating the traditional gender roles can be tough. Like we see that men are supposed to behave in a way or women are supposed to behave in a way, but that there are certain traits associated with it, and we see you someone who breaks these stereotypes. So, as a person who gives out a more feminine aesthetic, so how do you manage the tension between that personal expression and that those traditional gender roles?
Yeah. So, like I said, I always kind of rejected by default any traditional idea of gender identity or like gender norms. So today, when I create work, I never look at my work through a gendered lens. Um, like initially, especially when I created my work, I never looked at it through any gendered lens. And today, I always start with like I said, my idea of hypermasculinity, and then I just let it go crazy. Like I never think, okay, I have to kind of in some way um, conform to this XYZ ideology at all, because I don't connect to it, right? So I am going to create something that I connect with, and I feel is true to me. And if people look at it and people think, okay, this is um, super femme, or this is like super mask, or this is an amalgamation of the two, it's up to them. I'm not going to say anything about that. Like it's open to interpretation. All I'm creating is just a hyper masculine version, probably of myself, like a super extreme idea of masculinity. And if people are going to look at it and think, okay, it doesn't conform to gender identities, or it conforms to any femme identity, like it's up to them for them to choose how they associate with it. And if it becomes a part of pop culture, great. That's precisely what I want. I just want it to be very much a part of like the pop culture references.
So, Anvesh, also just one more question that we wanted to ask you following this is in a country where we see that LGBTQ community is, still underrepresented in some way, and it's not being highlighted in the mainstream media, so it suffers in terms of visibility as well. So we wanted to ask you that what are the challenges you face being part of this community, and how are you trying to overcome that, or are you still in that process of overcoming that? So it would be great if you could share some instances or shed light on it.
I think a lot of my trials and tribulations, if you would like to call that, was very much a part of my journey. I think at the start of my, you know, like adult life, when I think, or very much a part of my teenage years, I think specifically actually. Um, I was struggling a lot with, trying to understand what LGBTIQ plus is, what these terminologies are all about, and like I would go and I would read a lot about this on the internet. So that basically became like a big source of information for me. Or watching a lot of films. I watched a lot of films in my engineering days, especially. I would watch a lot of gay films. So just wanted to know, like there was like I was trying to find a sense of belonging, because obviously growing up in India, you do not come across like it's still very much like a parallel universe of sorts, like it's a parallel world. It's changed a lot today, I think, with social media. At least you create a bubble of sorts, but mainstream abhi bhi matlab, जैसे हम the where I live, like I don't know of another one single gay person in my own locality. Like it's still like such a foreign idea. You still come across only like cisgender heterosexual couples, and मतलब queerness तो है ही नहीं ना यहाँ आसपास कहीं भी. So I think that is something that I miss having here in India for sure. Like I don't like the idea that आप ही हो, you're the only one that you know of, and I don't think that's obviously it's not possible that I'm the only one who's queer in this entire universe that I'm living in. But um, I kind of like, especially like the last year when I was living in Ireland, I kind of miss that, when I could just go out and be surrounded by like queer people, and you can go out and hang out with them, and like most of my friends from my classroom were like a lot of queer people, and we would hang out together a lot. So I miss that aspect of my life. But here, of course, you have queer people who you meet, through shows and award functions, or you know influencer events that you go for, or creator events that you go for, any awards night. And I like going and meeting them, of course. um, but other than that, I think like most of my like the difficult times were really in the teenage years, when I wanted to kill myself. I wanted to not live anymore. I'd kind of lost any source of hope entirely. There was nothing that I looked forward to anymore in my life. I've gone through like really difficult like times when I went through depression, and it was a very challenging time. And somehow eventually I kind of like lived through it, and I reached a point where I found hope through my art. And even today, when I feel sad, when I'm extremely upset about something, or I'm extremely anxious. And this year has been a very difficult year for me, like personally. My mother went through some really difficult times because of her health. And I was kind of moving in between like Ireland and India. It was, you know, emotionally very difficult for me to kind of, have this change of environment. And, kind of, and I was still like kind of pursuing my masters at that point. So I was, academically also very stressed, and was going through a lot. So in those difficult times, I kind of would draw. Every time I would feel anxious, I would be like, let's draw something and let's create something, and that's how I'm going to feel a sense of like solace and feel a sense of calm. So yeah, I think that's how I have navigated. I think different people navigate it very differently. Some people, obviously, many people struggle with finding channels as well. And I know we obviously talk a lot about looking for help, but like for someone like me, for example, I don't. I'm very scared of asking for help. I'm very introverted in that sense. A lot of people look at me as a very extroverted person, but in some ways, I'm very, very introverted, and I don't like to share a lot of my, what's happening in my life with anyone. I like to keep it to myself. So I think those that can be difficult. Kind of walking through that, navigating through those times. But every morning I kind of wake up and I kind of put a smile on my face, even when the times are like really, really difficult, and kind of tell to myself, okay, I have to do this. I have to.
You spoke about watching movies, right? You consumed a lot of those movies, right? And Roshni here has mentioned how LGBTQI community is still underrepresented in some way in our country, especially. So now my question is like, what is your take on this cishet people or cishet actors playing the roles of transgender people or gay people, like when they are when they haven't gone through such original experiences as a gay man would have, as a transgender person would have, right? So what's your take on that? I just wanted to know that.
I think if we really want to create a world where, you know, I think we've reached a point now where we're actively discussing the idea of privilege, like because in India we've for the longest time we've spoken about meritocracy a lot, like if you're good at this, you will go, you will be gifted or rewarded in an XYZ ways. But today we've reached a point where we actively talk about, oh, okay, you can also kind of be rewarded. Like we're finally talking about how privilege plays a huge role in the way you get rewarded in your, in our respective lives. And I feel like for someone who is a queer actor, someone who's a trans person and wants to be an actor, or someone who's a gay individual who also does not conform to, who also does not pass off as like under the cishet lens, for example, because there are a lot of gay men and women who don't pass off in that cishet lens. And they obviously struggle with having opportunities being given to them, right? So if they are also not being given roles of queer people, and we just kind of rub it under the carpet and brush it under the carpet, and we say, oh, there are not enough queer people who can actually play, who can do a good job as actors, then we have failed as casting directors in finding the right kind of talent. Because obviously in a country of 1.4 billion, there are enough amazing, incredible queer actors. You have failed in finding them and giving them the right kind of opportunities. And I feel like cishet people anyway have so many options. Na? If you don't get to play a trans role or if you don't get to play a queer role, you have 600 different more options to choose from. But a queer person is anyway rejected by default from playing a straight person, and they don't even get to play that one queer role in one off queer film that comes in, like, 10 years. How many queer films do we have, like, in pop culture? You can count on finger how many queer films we've had in the last 10 years, in a decade. Imagine, we have like thousands of films that we make in our country, and we have, like, साल में एक मिला बना होगा या साल में एक बना भी नहीं होगा probably. So if we don't even get those roles, then what are we left with, so I do agree that, we need to kind of take a step back and look at how we are, sharing these opportunities in the correct manner with the correct people, because for that queer person, that one opportunity could mean paying rent and putting food on the plate, right? But for other, that cishet person who has like thousand other opportunities, they probably will make more money and probably will buy, just, move from a big house to a bigger house. So, like, like, how do you even create?
Right. Yeah.
It's a very interesting take on that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. So while we are talking about gender and queerness, I wanted to ask you, like, how do you address the intersection of your identity as a queer man and as an artist in a country like India, where queer people still struggle? That's what we are talking about,
yeah.
right? So yeah, how do you, like? What's your take on that?
Okay. I think initially, like, I was creating work to create almost like a universe of sorts, where I could archive like a lot of queer content. So it was basically like kind of trying to find a sense of belonging, because my journey as a queer person is also evolving over the years, right? Like initially, like in my early teenage year, like in my teenage years or late teens, it was all about, okay, I want to find a sense of belonging. I want to find more people like me. I want to create a universe where I can kind of populate it with more queer things. But obviously now it's kind of evolved a lot, and now I don't look at myself through, like, queerness is just a very small aspect of my life. It's not my entire personality. Like, my focus today is entirely on, you know, becoming a better artist, becoming better at my work, or becoming a better technical artist, or learning how to make, digital games, or that's the kind of, era that I'm in. I want to be financially secure. I want to have a home for myself. Like, those are the priorities, right, today in my life. So obviously, like, being queer is a very small aspect of those things today. It's evolved a lot over time, and today I just want to create work that I connect with, and I want to create work that obviously pays, that is also something that people connect with at, on a larger scale. Like, I definitely take a look at the insights and see how my artworks are performing on Instagram, on the social network. I want to know what people think about it. And obviously, I want to book more gigs with, bigger firms and bigger organizations, and I want to freelance more and more and more. And I'm, of course, needless to say, extremely grateful that I've had the opportunity to work with some of the best and the biggest firms. I've worked with the WhatsApp team based in the US. And I still remember getting that email from them and thinking, oh my God, they know about me. Like, they chose three people from around the world to create queer themed artworks, and they chose Anwesh from India. And, like, it's crazy. It's insane to me that they even know about me. So, like, I'm very grateful I get to create all the work that I do. I'm very grateful when people reward me and, like, I get awards or I get recognized for the work that I do. I'm extremely, like, humbled, and I'm filled with a lot of gratitude for all the love that I get. And I just want to continue to create more and more and more artwork. I think as an artist, your hand never stops. Like, it is going to work till miles to go before I sleep. So till my very last breath, I would be, painting and creating more and more and more artwork. So that's how I want I want to basically have like a legacy of mine that there was an Anwesh who created all this crazy cuckoo artwork, and it was extremely colorful and it extremely like vibrant, and I want people to.
Yeah. Right. We wish the same for you,
Yeah,
actually.
exactly.
We wish you continue making art and inspiring
Yeah,
people and just making people happy all around,
yeah.
because it's your art. It's very vibrant.
Hmm.
It just
It's very
brushes you
beautiful.
off with so
Yeah.
much positivity.
Yes.
It's that great.
We
Yeah.
want you to do this forever and ever and never
Yeah.
stop because it's
Yeah,
so nice.
right.
It's really nice. It's
Thank
really
you.
nice.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it. Because it really is my like vision. I want to be like, when you look at a Yayoi Kusama, the amazing, iconic Japanese artist, like she has a legacy of her that people look up to so much. And I want that to be, I mean, of course, that legacy is unlike, you can't touch that level of success or in a way. But I do want people to kind of remember me as this iconic artist. And I've always had this vision of being.
I believe you are. So, speaking of your art, and like your influences that you get from, who are your biggest role models from within the LGBTQI community?
So there is an artist called Michael the Three, and his was one of the first like cyber art pieces that I came across on Instagram. Like this is years ago, like 2014, 15. I used to follow him and I still follow him, and he's very nice. And I sometimes chat with him on Instagram as well, which is crazy that he reverts to my like responses, and he's kind of become like an online friend of mine. And I think he's based out of France, and I really like his vision as a cyber artist. So I really like I'm inspired by his work in the space of cyber art, and I think it will always be the first kind of references that I came across. There's also an Indian artist called Kushagra that I follow. He's a 3D artist, and he actually, in fact, recently collaborated with Bjork as well, and he created this really beautiful, like 3D render, which was used to kind of like an outfit of sorts, which he worked with another photographer with to create like that entire vision, and it's just beautiful. And I really like his 3D renders that he shares on Instagram. And of course, like Rani Kohinoor, my mother, Sushant Divkekar, I think she is really someone who has taught me all about confidence and all about owning up, owning up to who you are, and really believing in who you are, and that leads to greater and greater things in life and greater success. And I will forever like look up to her as someone who's created a legacy of her own, and someone who has taught me so much about myself. um, so yeah, I think these probably are three people that I would really look up to. And I used to also like really look up to. I mean, I still look up to Andreas Derleth. Actually, like he was Mr. Gay World in 2012 when I was like around 16 around that time, and I saw him and I was like so inspired. I was like, I want to be like him, and I want to basically kind of prep myself and prepare myself for Mr. Gay World, and that's how I basically started preparing, and I ended up becoming like the youngest one to ever win, and I still am. Like it's crazy that after it's going to be my 10th, like soon. I think in another 2 years we will reach like my 10th year of being Mr. Gay India, like a decade of being Mr. Gay India. But I also wonder, like, in some ways, it's kind of worrying that I'm still the youngest one. Like, I want there to be more young people who also kind of become a part of the organization.
Yeah,
That's great.
that's great.
Yeah.
Um, Now that you have given us a glimpse of your work and your inspiration, and it's really great and it's really amazing. So, how do you see your journey so far?
How have you?
Because you have
Yeah.
done so much of work and all these things. So, how do you see your journey so far, right?
You know what? I mean, some days I kind of like sit back and I always feel that it's not enough. Obviously, like there are obviously times, and I think now I'm going through that phase where I'm like, oh my god, like I have so much to create, like I'm really falling behind. And I'm always that person who kind of always wants to be like an overachiever. And if I don't achieve like my XYZ goals, then I'm like, oh my god, like I haven't achieved XYZ things. And this year actually has been like a big year for me in terms of like my career. Like it's such an extreme year in some terms of like my personal life has gone through like so much turmoil, but like touch wood, by God's grace, my career and I've has been like great in some in the way that I've like earned so many awards and I was recently like awarded the Rising Talent of the Year by Jagran, influencer awards, and I was just amazed that amongst all these incredible, amazing people, they thought that I am someone who deserves this recognition, and it's great that kind of people acknowledge and see your work. But I have like I'm of course like as an artist I don't yet feel like fulfilled. I obviously feel like I have so much more to do, and obviously my aspirations are like through the roof. So sometimes I scare myself with the dreams that I have, but I feel like if your dreams don't scare you, then are your dreams even big enough? So they have to kind of scare you, right? So yeah, I think I'm very scared by myself sometimes. I'm very scared by how I put myself more often than not in very difficult situations. And I'm always like, oh my God, why did I do this to myself? Like, I was happy doing this or that, and like, I didn't have to do this to myself. I didn't have to go through this turmoil, and but you kind of have to in some ways push yourself. So in some ways, yes, there have been times when I look back and I feel happy about all the like myriad of things that I've done, and I'm very, very grateful for all the opportunities. I will never not be grateful because I know what it means to not have a lot of these big opportunities, and I would always wonder how do people get access to all these opportunities. But there are still so many more that I don't have access to. So I do want to be able to make the most of those big opportunities and collaborate with bigger brands and you know make a lot more money.
We are sure you're going to
Yeah.
achieve that milestone.
Yeah, yeah, pretty sure about
Yeah.
that. So now that we're talking about collaboration, so you're always on the go, like you said, you're always working. So are there any future projects that you are particularly excited about and you want to talk about them?
Yeah.
So I anyway have my own label, the Feminine, under which I make a lot of wedding artworks for people, and like I always try to sometimes take like a sabbatical of sorts, but that sabbatical never comes. So it's like one artwork ends, and then now another client comes in, and then I'm basically like busy doing another artwork. So at the moment, I'm extremely busy with wedding artworks. And a lot of these wedding artworks actually, unfortunately, don't get to share. Sometimes I do when my clients are okay with it, but I feel like it's something so personal that I obviously don't share as much with the larger audience. But I'm very grateful for all the people who have reached out to me and have showed so much interest in my work. And I love creating wedding artworks for people because it's an experience that I curate for them. It's an aspiration for a lot of people to have their artworks being made by me, and I'm so grateful that they choose me to to be a part of their big day. So at the moment, I'm just overwhelmed with like a lot of wedding artworks, but I kind of want to also indulge in a bit more of my personal practice. That is actually one of my bigger goals because I think like commercial projects are always on, but I have reached a point where I kind of want to up my game and I want to kind of indulge myself in more ways of creating art, which I have been doing in the past few months, where I'm exploring more softwares and I'm finding more ways to represent what's going on in my head. So I think there are a couple of like AR projects that I'm kind of interested in. I want to make like a couple of filters, AR filters for Instagram that are basically like my own. I do want to. I do have like a couple of ideas for like cyber art pieces that I want to kind of create. I want to kind of get a little bit more into character development. That is one of my personal goals, especially like 3D character development and concept art. That's something that I really, really want to do. And at the moment, in my like my day job, I work as a game developer. So I think I kind of do want to indulge myself a bit more also in like developing a few more games just for fun, like just for practice. I recently actually developed a game for which was part of my thesis, in Ireland, and it's a role-playing game. It's a it's a queer-themed role-playing game. It's a really fun take on one's journey as a queer person, and I'm really happy with the way the game turned out, and it had a great response when I went for demonstration with that game, and there were so many people who wanted to play that game, and it was so much fun. But I really want to kind of see myself taking my art to another level, um, and I definitely like have like a few milestones that I kind of want to like be fulfilled. I really want to make like a doodle for Google. I think that's one of my biggest kind of like I have this vision that I want to do this for them, and I have collaborated with Google multiple times actually, and I'm very grateful for those opportunities. But I'm still waiting for my email when I get to create that doodle.
I hope you receive that email soon. Sooner the better, and we
Yeah,
get to
exactly.
see
We
your
really pray
art.
that. So, Anvesh, we just have one last question that we wanted to ask you. So, you are someone who has accomplished a lot of things. Like as Chandana said, that you are a
Mhm.
writer, you're a model, and you have done a lot of things. So, just a question that we wanted to ask you: that what's the one thing that you would, just one thing that you would like to pick, and you would like to pursue that forever, or something that you are very interested in future, just one thing that you would really love to, or are you passionate about?
Well, I think one thing that I'm really passionate about is art, which was basically a hobby, and it became, ended up becoming very much my career at this point. So, I'm also a very fickle person. So I cannot do just one thing. I have to do 100 different things all at once, and I feel like I perform sometimes the best when I'm doing two or three things parallelly instead of doing just one thing, because then I kind of get bored by it and it stifles me in some ways. And I have tried doing that where I've just kind of indulged myself entirely in art, and I've seen that my art kind of stifled and it didn't become what I wanted it to be. Um, so it has to definitely, one thing that I would love to kind of continue doing is basically my art for the rest of my life. And I do want to, like I said, create different variations of it as well. I don't want to like indulge myself in just one form of art. And I think some of the greatest artists in this world have never actually done just one kind of art. Like we know them for one kind of art. Like for example, when you think about Mondrian, you think about the Mondrian print or in yellow, white, red, and blue. But if you actually go and visit Mondrian's body of work, Mondrian has created a lot of different variations of that specific art that we know him for, and he's created a lot of traditional pieces as well, traditional paintings and portraits and all that. And the same with like Picasso. We know Picasso for this very geometric, like modern art pieces, but that's not the only piece that he made. He was very much a traditional artist when he started off his career. So Edward Munch, for example, another one, like, we know him for that Scream painting, but he's not just made the Scream, he has made incredible portraits and really traditional, beautiful, crazy art pieces as well. So, and I remember like this time I actually went to, because Edward Munch was Norwegian, and I went to Norway and I went to Edward Munch's museum. They've made a museum which is completely just, kind of like dedicated to his body of work in Oslo. And I saw that he was basically experimenting even with 3D forms, and he was experimenting with like sculpting and etching and like other ways of basically creating artworks. So I was like, great, I'm not the only one who's kind of wanting to create art in different ways, but and art is just so vast. A lifetime is not enough to create all the kind of art forms that I want to explore. I've also always wanted to kind of learn how to play the sitar. That's one thing that I really kind of want to learn, but I hope that I kind of get to. That's the only thing that I've kind of not fulfilled, like one of my wishes, because I grew up like wanting to become a musician. I wanted to be like a dancer. I wanted to be like 100 different things, and I've done all of those things. Like I've learned a lot of these things, indulged myself in a lot of these things, and kind of went on to become like an artist. And I was like, this is my thing. This is what I want to stick to. But yeah, I would love to kind of learn maybe someday a little bit of sitar as well.
I think the music industry is not ready for Anwesh Sahoo. But yeah,
Yeah, we would love to
we would love
see
you to
you doing
explore.
lots of
Yeah, yeah.
things.
We're
Yeah,
really looking forward to what you
yeah,
have in store for us,
yeah,
for everyone.
yeah.
Just making people happy like that.
And we are sure that whatever you do, it's going to be really amazing.
Yeah,
We have that faith in you.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, that sadly brings us to the end of our session today.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed this
Yes, we really enjoyed this
conversation.
conversation.
We really had a lot of fun.
Likewise, likewise. I'm so glad to be a part of this conversation, and thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for letting me be a part of this conversation. I hope that the conversation doesn't end here. It's like just the beginning, and I hope we get to collaborate as well in the future.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're really, really grateful that we had you in this show.
Yeah.
And as you said, this conversation will go on in the
Yeah.
future as well. And
Right.
best of luck for whatever you do.
For your
And
future endeavors, for everything. We
Everything.
wish you the best.
Yeah, and I hope you learn sitar soon.
Yeah.
And post it on your Instagram and social so we get a glimpse of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So much. And likewise, wishing both of you the best as well. The best in life.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you so
much,
much.
Anwesh. Thank you.
Thank you so much.